Hello again. In this video, what I'm going to share with you are some ideas that reflect some of the research surrounding attachment theory. Attachment theory is way too big for me to cover comprehensively, and I'm not an attachment researcher myself, but there's certain things that we can glean from the work of people who've done some of the research surrounding what attachment is, and it seems to play a really integral role in relationships, especially with younger people, but also in terms of our own self-awareness of who we are and how we react to others in relationships, or how we think about ourselves. So what attachment theory points to, very much in a nutshell, is the way that we're all sort of wired, to use that analogy, sort of wired to connect with others. There are attachment figures in each of our early lives. Those adults or caregivers in our lives who serve a certain function. And what attachment systems in the body and the mind do are to direct us to borrowing, as infants, borrowing the more mature functional abilities of the caregivers or attachment figures in our lives. In other words, we kind of mimic and simulate what we see in those other adults in our lives, and that's how we learn very much how to think of ourselves and how to have relationships. So we're borrowing those more mature functions of our caregivers, and the systems of attachment that are kind of built into us to do that drive us to seek proximity or closeness with those people, and it also drives us to seek communication or connection with those people. And I mean, closeness and connection, that's the stuff of interaction, and that's a huge part of what these videos that I'm putting together for you are directed toward. And so it's those interactions, that closeness and connection, that proximity and communication, that is really the terrain or the fertile ground of this borrowing of mature cognitive, mental, emotional functioning. And you as educators, or as anyone who working with children and adolescents in any capacity at all, really are potentially in that role. And much of attachment is, of course, parenting and home life and family. But when we work with children for long periods of time, we become important, big parts of their lives, and really integral parts of their lives, especially early on. We actually do move in closer to that role of becoming an attachment figure to them. There's at least that possibility. And so attachment figures aren't always parents. Sometimes they're those teachers who made a big impact when the parents weren't making that type of positive impact, or even if they were. So this highlights, for me again at least, the important emphasis on interaction and how to use interaction, and learning how to use interaction skillfully as being so important in the job of helping young people thrive in whatever way you work with them. So this process that begins in infancy, within the first few days, but certainly the first year or 2 years, actually has been shown to carry through life. And what this implies is that even when you work with older children or adolescents, their attachment systems are still very much a part of who they think of themselves as. It still very much drives how they create and sustain relationships with you and with other people. And it also implies that you yourself are also guided by your early experiences and the attachment system that is inherent and built into you in a way. And the way you think about yourself, and the way that you have relationships, and the way you treat those relationships, the way you interpret those relationships and what they mean, are all shaped by, or guided by, or influenced by pretty heavily your early experience, or your early attachment experiences. So These are important considerations because it's kind of a dynamic thing. Our attachment systems are kind of like living, breathing, changing things throughout our lives, but they have certain stability throughout time too. So that's just a consideration to highlight again the importance of interactions and how you bring yourselves to those interactions, and even how you develop skills of self-awareness while you do that. There have been shown to be 4 attachment categories. I'm not going to go into the details of what they are, but there are 4 main or primary attachment categories. And the real thing to bring away from that is that within each of those attachment categories, people learn strategies of coping or of adapting to challenges in life as a result of having experiences that lead to those categories. So in other words, there's secure, ambivalent, avoidant, and disorganized attachment categories. If I grow up in a circumstance in a family in which I end up developing avoidant attachment, say, there are certain ways that I might behave toward others and behave toward myself or think about myself that somewhat naturally and even predictably come up as a way that I've learned to adapt the best I can. And those strategies, those efforts to adapt aren't always the best. Sometimes they don't help me as much, and sometimes they don't help others as much. And learning that children and even yourself all have these strategies of adapting, of coping, of getting by that have been learned over time but might not be as optimized or effective is a pretty important thing. And maybe just considering what that might imply or how that might show up in your own lives or in your own classrooms could be something that you think about. And a big way that attachment strategies are learned and reinforced are through nonverbal communication. And if you think about this in this way, nonverbals are really eye contact, facial expression, tone of voice, gestures, posture, the timing and intensity of your voice. And so all of these changing and dynamic parts of what nonverbal communication are very much a natural part of how we communicate, and most of the time unintentional, but they can actually kind of be harnessed and used more intentionally. And that's a pretty important ability. We have this great range of extra communication, not just what we say, that we can actually tap into and skillfully use. Using our posture to face, these are simple examples, using our posture to face someone as we're directly looking at them in the eyes and nodding our heads or something like that. This is a different experience to a person than facing away, not really looking at them, listening but not really seeming to respond in any way. And so simple examples like that are easy enough to understand, but in close one-to-one contact or even working with a group of children, using those nonverbals intentionally and skillfully can actually make a great impact on how they see you and how they're influenced by you. So a huge interruption to developing what's called secure attachment could be thought of as big T trauma. And I'm only mentioning this because it seems that this is much more part of people's lives than is typically known. All I'll really say about this is that when children go through traumatic things, they don't respond to it in the way that adults might. Being able to wrap their heads around it, to put words to it, isn't always something that they have the capability of doing. So it comes out in other ways. And if this is a part of a child's life, that might bring to bear the responsibility of you to help them through your relationship with them. And you don't have the responsibility to fix the trauma in others' lives, but the relationship being the impactful tool you can use is something that is always there, always available. And in the development of secure attachment, there's come to be known 4 S's. These are ways that things we can bring to a relationship to help promote a sense of secure attachment. Safety, knowing that they're free from threat or terror or harm. Being seen, that means a feeling that the child might have that the adult or the caregiver they're with sees into them in a way, sees their inner world. Soothed, when they feel, not if of course, but when they feel a rupture or a disturbance in the stability of their emotions or understanding, having someone to help them soothe their nervous system, soothe the worrisome or anxious thoughts that might be present there for them in that moment, so that they can learn how to do it themselves over time. And the last component, the last S, is secure. A feeling or a general sense of it's okay. Even when things are chaotic and crazy, this underlying sense that things are okay in a deep way. These are components of secure attachment that we can bring to our relationships with young people and try to help them foster those pieces of secure attachment. And another way to think about it, a way that we'll kind of outline in the next several videos, of how to be an integral part in the attachment building of another child, or how to be a skillful part of an interaction, using presence, attunement, and resonance to develop or cultivate a sense of trust. This will be something that we outline and unpack a little bit more as the next few videos roll out. And these will be things that will have some pieces of practice in them, things you might be able to try and experiment with to bring more of those pieces of presence, attunement, resonance, and trust to be a healthier and skillful part of interactions with others.